Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to summarize what I see under climate science. So, what is climate science? At first, we should discuss what is science. There should be some rules. One of the former presidents of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences more than 100 years ago and told that science is a methodological and systematic human activity aimed at learning about reality. Many other classical definitions say the same. According to Karl Popper, science progresses by attempting to falsify or refute hypotheses in empiric, objective, and rational way. We know from Thomas Kuhn that there are periods of normal science within a shared paradigm and periodic revolutions where a new paradigm replaces the old ones. But I like very much it is Peter Van's approach. Science is an everlasting self-correction. I heard it from him a few months ago. What is not science? The so-called postmodern science, I think it is just a sophistry. Paul Feyerabend told that science, I think sophistry, anarchic enterprise where no single method applies and anything goes. And also I think that consensus building is outside the rules of science. What is climate? Easy. The Greek word means inclination, slope, latitude. The Hungarian éghajlat means bend of the sky, and it is a very expressive. The most precise definition comes also from 100 years ago. Climate is what on average we may expect, weather is what we actually get. We find about a dozen of modern definitions. According to the artificial intelligence, climate is the average weather patterns in a region over a long period. We know it. But as Demetris Koutsayannis called our attention, these modern definitions of climate do not highlight its non-static nature. Climate is represented as a time average, and the time average of a stochastic process is not a number, but a stochastic process. What is climate system? This is the next question. The atmosphere is like an apple peel around the planet Earth. In my geophysical approach, the climate system is the ensemble of elements of the Earth system and their interactions. There are extraterrestrial factors, sun, solar system, space, terrestrial factors, phenomena of the atmosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere, cryosphere, biosphere, including human, and interaction which are not precisely known or completely unknown. According to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the climate system is apparently, they give a totality, but it is a very restrictive definition, as you can see, compared to my approach. What is climate change? This is the next issue. Everybody knows the World Meteorological Organization definition. Climate change is a term used to describe changes in the state of the climate that can be identified by changes in the average, and so on and so on. In my geophysical approach, a changing characteristic climatic state of a region on decadal scale due to the ever-changing elements of the Earth system. Demetris Koutsayannis argues that it is a redundant term, a needless term, because the term climate change is a pleonasm, as the climate, like the weather, has been ever-changing. Okay? And we have a fourth definition for climate change. The three former are partially compatible, but the UNFCCC definition is not compatible even with the World Meteorological Organization definition. It is very restrictive. It is in conflict even with the WMO one. According to UNFCCC, climate change is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere. So it is simply not correct, this definition. So it is not so easy to answer what is climate science, because the basic terms are controversial. We should look into the UNFCCC in details. Since 1992, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, human-caused greenhouse gases, you can see in red the greenhouse gases, have been in the spotlight. Okay? So it is a framework, and all phenomena and interactions outside the UNFCCC framework are largely ignored or attributed simply to human. Let's look at it again. So this is the UNFCCC science. There is the space, the solar system. Don't forget about the angular momentum in the solar system. The sun, which is huge power. Water, hydrosphere, cryosphere, clouds, biodynamics, geodynamics, energy transport from equator to the poles, and the feedbacks, I name it the Le Chatelier principle. It is guaranteed that restrictive definitions and restricted focus, you will get biased conclusions. Since 1992, the UNFCCC has been leading science to wrong conclusions. The climate consensus, which is the basis of the UNFCCC science, is more than 40 years old. Here you can see the identity card data of the consensus. Its name is International Conference on the Assessment of the Role of Carbon Dioxide and of Other Greenhouse Gases in Climate Variations and Associated Impact, quite a long name. Its parents are the United Nations Environmental Programme, the UNESCO's International Council of Scientific Union, and VMO, the new leadership, that time new leadership of VMO. Place of birth is Villach, Austria, date of birth October 1985, and you can reach the birth document on the internet. It was held, this conference, even you can see a photo, between the two climate conferences, Geneva and Geneva in 79 and 90. So we should look at them in details. The first Geneva conference was about mostly pure climate science, but as was remarked by Rudolf Czernyi, at that time Assistant or Deputy Secretary General of VMO, he wrote later in a paper that the position of the great powers was that time climate change is a political issue. They also felt, who understands this better than them, take charge of steering up the international public's interest in the climate issue. And he added, with this we strayed onto somewhat swampy ground. It was really very swampy. The second Geneva conference was a mixed quality climate science already. It was told by Rudolf Czernyi again, the difference is about the same as buying bread in a small bakery or a supermarket. The latter has more bread, but the former is much better. And the agent who transformed this bakery into supermarket was the consensus in Villach. The Villach conference has had two important tasks. One, to develop a consensus statement on the present state of our scientific knowledge of increases in CO2, and secondly, to develop sound recommendations for action by countries and by international agencies. And consensus number one can be found in the document. It is amount of some trace gases in the troposphere, notably carbon dioxide and others, which influence the Earth's climate. We can make a fact check, compare it to the reality. This figure was presented at a Hungarian Academy of Sciences meeting by George Major, and this was discussed by me 1.5 years ago. We can see the radiation components of the Earth. These acronyms, more precisely, are time derivatives. Okay, there are time derivatives, and this is the meaning of the acronyms. Incoming solar radiation, reflected solar radiation, absorbed solar radiation, outgoing long-wave radiation, and the basic formulas you can find here. And what you can see in this figure, among these components, that the actual warming The Earth's energy imbalance is due to an increase in the absorbed solar radiation, so nothing to do with the CO2. The trends are changing on a decadal scale. It is also interesting because it shows the dynamics. What happened to climate science in Hungary? On basis of these papers, we can tell that representatives of Hungary have been involved in the activities of international environmental organizations from the very beginning, including cooperation in climate science and climate policy. We had a member in the Brundtland Committee and also in its program council. And later there was a huge academic project where one of the conclusions was that a comprehensive domestic climate policy is also necessary in Hungary. It was added that the conclusions of the scientific community's analysis have been and are being taken into account in policy programs more or less, which is very polite, depending on other aspects and priorities. So we can state on basis of these documents also that climate policy fatally embraced climate science in Hungary too. I find scandalous this paper, Jebel and Russo's 2 years ago, that climate science requires a methodological shift away from its initial physics-first orientation toward one of usability-centered science for policy. Physical science value-free ideal, I mean the rules, can hamper the production of usable science for policy. In the same paper. In many publications, there are statements that we have known the determining cause for a long time, so there is no need for research. The UN Under-Secretary General for Communication, he told 3 years ago that they own the science. So finally, we try to answer the question, what is climate science? Climate science is a methodology aimed at learning about climate. But I would like to remind you the rules of climate science. These are things that are gods and not Caesars. If you know the New Testament from Matthew, I repeat it, the rules of climate science are things that are gods and not Caesars. This so-called science for climate policy is a sophistry. They use to such statements, the end justifies the means. No, please. Anything goes. No, please. And consensus building, of course, not a scientific tool. Physics-oriented climate science is considered as climate science as far the rules of sciences are strictly followed. Climate science is far to be settled. Questions in true climate science are always welcome. And the dogmatic adherence to a frozen view based on a very old consensus, it is not science. It is time to rigorously re-examine each and every climate claims. In the past, we had science as a raft, and we had hypotheses inside. Now we have a sophistry for climate policy. It is a warm ship, CO2 inside. In the future, we should have again a true climate science with hypotheses. And the strict rules from the heaven are with us. Thank you for your kind attention, for understanding that there is a need for a healthy and honest physics-oriented climate science. Thank you.